Why had the gunfire suddenly stopped? Captain James Reeves pressed his back against the baked earth of the Hindu Kush, lungs burning, sweat dripping into his eyes. For 20 brutal minutes, the air had been a storm of bullets, RPG fire, and shouts bouncing off the canyon walls. His six-man SEAL team had been forced into the riverbed, nowhere to run, nowhere to climb. They were ghosts already, he thought, but ghosts didn't bleed, and someone on that ridge was bleeding them dry. Then silence, not a truce, not mercy, something else. The first rifle crack had sounded almost casual, an echo carried across the mountains. The enemy machine gun pinning them down went quiet as its operator slumped forward, head snapping back like a marionette cut from its strings. Reeves blinked, unsure if exhaustion was finally tricking him. 3 seconds later, another shot. An RPG carrier spun backward, weapon flying from his grip before detonating harmlessly in dirt. Whoever was out there wasn't missing. One by one, the positions locking them in were being erased. Not suppressed, erased, as if some invisible hand was sweeping the battlefield clean. Viper actual to base, confirm overwatch, Reeves demanded into his useless radio, static still hissing. He almost didn't believe it when a voice broke through the interference. Sierra Whiskey to Viper team, move northeast toward the compound, you'll have cover. He froze, that voice, familiar, impossible. Kate Hayes, the comms specialist who was supposed to be sitting safe back at base. The same woman Reeves had dismissed 6 months ago as dead weight. Now, in the middle of an ambush that should have killed them all, she was the one giving orders. And she was the one saving their lives. But who was she, really? 6 months earlier, in a silent briefing room in Dam Neck, Virginia, the question had been whispered in Reeves's mind the moment she walked in. Why her? At 35, dark hair pulled tight into a severe bun, Hayes looked more like someone who should be pushing paper in a Pentagon office than preparing to infiltrate Taliban strongholds. She moved with precision but not confidence. Her gait had a tiny, almost imperceptible hitch, the kind Reeves's eyes picked up immediately, an old injury. Colonel Harrison introduced her like she was nothing more than a replacement cog. This is Kate Hayes, your new communications specialist for Operation Kingfisher. Reeves bristled. With all due respect, sir, my team is already fully staffed. We've trained 6 months for this deployment. The colonel's reply had cut through the air like a knife. I didn't ask for your opinion, Captain. Every man in Reeves's unit went still. The atmosphere changed in an instant, as if the weight of 40 years of Harrison's reputation had settled onto the table. Reeves had seen a lot of strange assignments in his 15 years running black operations. But this, a comms specialist parachuted into the middle of his carefully trained unit, with no explanation, no background he could trust, and, if he was honest, no apparent ability to keep up. He should have known then something was off. At the range, the truth seemed obvious. Hayes held her M4 like she'd learned it from a manual, not muscle memory. Her stance was wrong, grip awkward, rounds scattered wide and off-center. When Adams, Reeves's hotshot second-in-command, mocked her with a smirk and a too loud "Don't worry, sweetheart, we'll handle the dangerous stuff," she didn't respond. She didn't even flinch. That should have been the first clue. No embarrassment, no anger, just silence, as if she were deliberately pretending to be worse than she was. From the observation platform, Reeves had caught it, the tiniest twitch in her jaw, controlled breathing, deliberate restraint. She wasn't humiliated, she was holding something back. But why? That night Reeves couldn't shake the image of her mechanical awkwardness at the range. Then the image changed, moonlight on a different kind of range. Hayes assembling a sniper rifle with impossible fluidity. Her movements smooth, confident, not a beginner, a master. And the shots she fired in silence, every single one perfect. She wasn't supposed to know he was watching, but Reeves knew she had. When Reeves cornered Harrison afterward, The colonel's answer was worse than silence. "She's not just communications," Harrison admitted. "She's here for a reason, a good reason." Reeves's eyes had narrowed. "Classified. Above your clearance." For a man like Reeves, that was the real insult. Nothing about his own team should be above his clearance. Yet here was Hayes, a black hole in the middle of his mission, wrapped in secrecy so thick even her medical file was redacted except for one line: "Injury sustained in Baghdad, 2007. Baghdad, that word alone carried ghosts. And when Reeves pressed further, another truth slipped free from Colonel Winters, the spook who always seemed to be in the background. Ghost knife. A program Reeves wasn't supposed to know existed. A program that had taken soldiers and turned them into something else. Not just elite operatives, but weapons that could be turned on or off with a phrase. Dormant until activated. Hayes wasn't incompetent. She was compartmentalized. And that made her more dangerous than anyone else in the room. The team didn't know, not yet. To them, Hayes was still the struggling outsider, the one who froze during on the obstacle course, her body locking in terror for 15 long seconds that felt like an eternity. The whispers were merciless: PTSD, broken, liability. Adams said it flatly: "She's going to get us killed." But Reeves had seen the truth bleeding through the cracks, the way she moved when she thought no one was watching, the way her silence carried weight, not weakness. It wasn't PTSD that froze her, it was something deeper. Conditioning. And if the cage holding it ever broke, Reeves knew Spectre, the name whispered in ghost knife files, would surface. The real Kate Hayes. The one who was now, impossibly, out there on a ridge in Afghanistan, dropping Taliban fighters with surgical precision to save his team. Reeves hadn't trusted her 6 months ago, not in the briefing, not on the range, not even when he'd glimpsed the shadow of what she really was. But trust didn't matter anymore. Pinned in that riverbed, outnumbered and running out of ammunition, the truth had become unavoidable. Hayes wasn't the liability. She was the only reason they were still alive. Still, as Reeves signaled his battered team to move northeast under her cover, a different question gnawed at him. If Hayes wasn't just a comms specialist, if she wasn't even just a soldier, what exactly had the government made her into? And what would happen if they ever lost control of her again? The mountain air smelled of dust and gunpowder. Reeves pushed forward, dragging his injured teammate along, trusting the invisible sniper they couldn't see but could no longer deny. Every shot was deliberate, every silence was earned. And as he climbed toward higher ground, heart pounding, he realized something unsettling. Hayes hadn't just chosen to save them. She was waiting for something. Something only she knew. Something none of them were ready for. And the worst part, Reeves had the cold, unshakable feeling that when the moment came, she wouldn't hesitate. They would. But she wouldn't. Why had she come back into the fight now? Kate Hayes lay flat on the ridge, cheek pressed against the stock of her M110 sniper rifle. The world narrowed to her scope, her heartbeat, her breath. One by one, targets fell. Taliban fighters never even knew where death came from. But inside her chest, it wasn't triumph she felt. It was something darker. Why had she stepped out of the shadows for them, after all these years of hiding? The answer wasn't simple. It never had been. 6 months earlier, Virginia nights had been quieter, at least on the surface. But Hayes never slept. When the others in the barracks snored, she lay awake, still, controlled, listening to the breathing patterns of men who never trusted her. She waited until they all sank deep into unconsciousness before moving. Her steps were fluid in the dark, the limp almost invisible. Training had carved silence into her bones. In the armory, her fingerprints opened a case no ordinary comms specialist should have had access to. The sniper rifle was there, perfectly disassembled, every piece clean and ready. Her fingers remembered before her mind did, muscle memory from thousands of hours. Snap, slide, click. The weapon became whole again. She didn't turn on lights, didn't use ear protection. At the far lane of the range, in pure moonlight, she fired 6 shots, 6 perfect kills. Not the scatter she showed Adams earlier that day. Not the sloppy incompetence Reeves had witnessed at the range. This was the real Hayes. Or was it Spectre? Even she wasn't sure anymore. Old habits die hard. Colonel Harrison's voice came from the shadows. She didn't flinch. She had felt him there the moment he arrived. "It's not habit," she answered softly. "It's choice. I choose not to be what you made me." But the colonel had only given her that sad, weary look. The look of a man who had built something he no longer controlled. "He's out there, Kate Cooper, and he's hunting you." The name was enough to freeze her hands for a fraction of a second. Just a fraction. Then she resumed disassembling the rifle. "Then I'll wait for him," she said quietly, "or I won't." But Harrison's reply lingered in her ears long after he left. "No, you don't wait for Cooper, he waits for you." Reeves hadn't known any of this then. He'd only seen fragments. Hayes stumbling at the range, freezing during drills, moving too slow, too late, always a beat behind. To his men she was a liability. To him she was a puzzle. But when Winters slid a thin folder across the table, Reeves began to understand why none of it added up. The label on the folder was simple: Ghost Knife. He opened it reluctantly. Photos of operatives mid-action stared back at him. Faces blurred, but bodies moved with inhuman precision. Every strike, every shot, too efficient to be natural. And there, in the corner of a frame, was her. Kate Hayes, smaller than the others but lethal all the same. "She's one of them," Winters said. "Spectre." Reeves kept his face neutral, but his stomach sank. "Conditioned?" he asked. "Compartmentalized," Winters corrected. "The personality you see day to day, Hayes, is cover. The real operative only comes forward when the trigger phrase is spoken. And without it—" Winters studied him carefully. "Without it, she remembers everything she's done but can't access the skills. Like a computer locked behind a password. She knows who she is. She just can't be that person." Reeves shut the folder slowly. "In Baghdad." That was the word buried in the medical files. The one piece not redacted. Winters' eyes flickered. Baghdad broke her, or maybe it woke her. Depends how you look at it. He leaned forward. "Captain Cooper went rogue. He's hunting down his old unit. Hayes is next. And whether she likes it or not, she's the only one who can stop him." Reeves sat back, jaw tight. His men were already fractured over her presence. Now he had to carry this weight alone. He couldn't tell them, couldn't warn them. Hayes wasn't a comm specialist. She was a weapon. A weapon built for a war she never asked for. On the obstacle course, that truth had almost bled through. The moment the exploded, she had locked up. To the men it looked like fear, weakness. But Reeves had seen the subtle twitch in her eyes. That wasn't fear. That was memory colliding with conditioning. Her body wanted to move one way. Her mind forced it another. She wasn't scared of dying. She was scared of who she might become if she didn't control it. The others didn't understand. Adams was the loudest voice, declaring her broken, insisting she had no business in combat. Even Parker, the youngest, had muttered that maybe she just wasn't cut out for this life. But Reeves had caught the clenched fists at her sides, the controlled breath she used to hold herself steady. Not weakness. Restraint. It wasn't that she couldn't be Spectre. It was that she refused to be. Now on the ridge in Afghanistan, restraint was gone. The cage had cracked. Through the scope, Hayes tracked a moving target 200 yards away. She adjusted, compensated for wind, let her breath settle and squeezed the trigger. Another man dropped. Every motion was perfect economy, every decision instinctive. But her thoughts were louder than the gunfire. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not with Reeves's team, not in this fight. She had buried Spectre for years, buried her so deep she almost believed the comm specialist mask. But now, dragged back into the open, she couldn't deny the truth. She was still a weapon. And weapons didn't get to choose who pulled the trigger. In the ravine below, Reeves's team scrambled for higher ground, unaware of the war being waged not just around them, but inside the woman saving them. Every shot she fired carved open another wound from Baghdad. The explosion, the pleading voice of David Cooper in her earpiece, his command, "Don't leave me, Hayes." And her own voice mechanical detached, not Hayes at all. Mission parameters clear, proceeding to extraction. Then the silence, his silence. That was the moment she stopped being a soldier and became a ghost. And now, 6 months later, that ghost was back. Reeves's radio crackled again, as Hayes's calm voice cut through the chaos. "Viper team, you're clear. Move to the compound." He froze at her tone, calm, professional, too professional. That wasn't the voice of the hesitant comms specialist. That was someone else. And for the first time, Reeves realized the truth Harrison and Winters had been too cautious to say aloud. The woman on the ridge wasn't the liability. She was the contingency plan. And the terrifying part was, Reeves wasn't sure if she was saving them or testing herself. The mountain night pressed down heavy and silent once the last shot echoed away. Hayes remained prone, finger resting lightly against the trigger guard, eyes scanning for threats that no longer moved. Her body was steady, but her mind was at war. She hadn't spoken the trigger phrase. No one had. So why did Spectre feel so close to the surface? Maybe it wasn't about the words. Maybe it was about inevitability. Maybe the cage was already breaking. And deep down, she wondered if Reeves and his men realized just how dangerous that was. Because when Spectre came out fully, there would be no putting her back. Why was Reeves staring at her like that? Kate Hayes lowered the rifle slowly, sliding it back into its case with mechanical precision. Her breathing stayed even, but she could feel his gaze burning through her. The men had survived. That was the only reason they weren't broken in that riverbed, zipped into black bags by morning. They owed their lives to the unseen shooter on the ridge. But gratitude was what Reeves's eyes carried. It was caution, almost fear. Hours earlier in the command tent before deployment, Hayes had sat at the far end of the table, unremarkable, quiet, the one no one expected to be decisive when bullets started flying. Adams had laughed at her, loud enough for the others to hear. "That's 29 missed targets already, sweetheart. Don't worry, we'll let you carry the radio." The laughter spread, uneasy but real, men mocking the one they didn't understand. Hayes had kept her head down, hands folded, expression blank. But Reeves had seen the tiny flicker of muscle in her jaw, the kind of restraint that wasn't weakness. It was a warning. He should have paid more attention. Now, after the ambush, the team huddled in the compound Hayes had guided them toward. Jackson bled out on the cot in the corner, Mitchell working desperately over him. Dust hung in the air. The smell of cordite clung to their skin. Reeves finally broke the silence. "That wasn't luck out there, that was a sniper, a damn good one. Hayes, you want to tell me how a comms specialist does that?" The others turned toward her. Adams's smirk was gone. Parker's wide eyes clung to her face. Wilson shifted uneasily, watching. Hayes kept her voice calm. "Old training before comms, long time ago." "That's not an answer," Reeves pressed. She met his eyes then, not defiance, not apology, just a steady, unreadable calm. "No, Captain, it's not." Later, when the others finally slept, Reeves stepped outside into the cold Afghan night. The stars above felt close enough to touch. The mountains loomed, sharp and indifferent. He lit a cigarette, the glow briefly illuminating the lines of exhaustion in his face. "What do you know that I do?" he muttered to the dark. "More than you'd like." The voice came from behind him. Colonel Harrison, his outline sharp in the moonlight. He had appeared silently, like he always did. Reeves turned, jaw tight. "You've been using my team as pawns. She's not what you said she was." "No," Harrison admitted, "she's more." Reeves exhaled smoke through his nose, anger simmering. "I don't care about your classified projects. I care about the men under my command. If Hayes loses it out there, they'll die." Harrison stepped closer, his voice low. "She's the only reason you're still alive tonight. Don't forget that." "That's not the point," Reeves snapped. "Of course it is," Harrison countered. "Because in the field, results are the only point that matters." Reeves stared at him for a long moment, then crushed the cigarette into the dirt. "She's not stable. I saw her freeze on the course. I saw the way she fights it," Harrison finished. "Yes, she does, every second of every day. That's the difference between her and Cooper. He surrendered to it, she resists." "And when she can't anymore?" Reeves asked quietly. Harrison's silence was the answer. Inside the compound, Hayes lay awake. She had heard every word outside, though Reeves and Harrison thought they were alone. She hated that she had overheard, hated more that Harrison had spoken truths she hadn't wanted said aloud. She did fight it. Every moment of every day was a battle not against the enemy, but against herself, against the ghost inside her head, the one called Spectre. And sometimes, late at night, she wondered if the fight was already lost. The next morning, Adams confronted her openly. "You froze back there in training. Now suddenly you're a sniper god saving us all. What the hell are you, Hayes?" The others went still. Even Parker, normally her only quiet defender, didn't speak. Hayes kept her expression neutral. "Part of this team," she said simply. Adams stepped closer, fury burning in his eyes. "Don't give me that. We all saw it. You're not who you say you are, and I don't trust you." Hayes didn't flinch. "You don't have to." Her calm unnerved him more than anger would have. He jabbed a finger toward her chest. "If you get one of us killed because of your secrets." "Lieutenant," Reeves's voice cut in like steel. Adams froze, shoulders stiff, eyes still locked on Hayes. "Back off," Reeves ordered. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Adams finally stepped away, jaw tight, muttering under his breath. But the seed of doubt was planted in everyone's mind now. Who was she really? Later that day, Reeves found Hayes alone, cleaning her rifle. He studied her for a long moment before speaking. "Why are you here?" She didn't look up. "Orders." "That's not what I'm asking." Finally, she lifted her eyes to his, calm, steady, unblinking. "Because someone has to stop him." "Cooper," Reeves said. She nodded once. "You knew this would happen," he pressed. "Not when, not how, but yes." Reeves's jaw tightened. "And my team, were we ever more than bait in all this?" Hayes looked away, and her silence was the only answer he needed. That night, as she lay on her cot, Hayes stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about Baghdad. But memories weren't something you could order away. Cooper's voice echoed in her mind, his desperate plea, his acceptance when she didn't come. "Understood, complete the mission." And then the blast, the searing pain in her leg, the knowledge that she had obeyed protocol, not humanity. It had been the right choice. The mission had saved thousands. But the cost was one man. And that one man had become her shadow. Now he was out there, waiting, watching, hunting. And he wouldn't stop until one of them was dead. Reeves didn't sleep either. He sat in the compound's command room, staring at Hayes's redacted file. Ghost Knife, Spectre, a program that wasn't supposed to exist. He hated secrets. They got men killed. But as much as he hated it, he also knew one thing. Without her, they wouldn't have survived yesterday. With her, they might not survive tomorrow. He rubbed a hand over his face, exhausted. What kind of war had they been dragged into? A war where the most dangerous enemy might not be outside the walls. It might be sleeping in the next room. Outside, the mountains were silent. The stars burned cold. And far away, in another dark room, David Cooper studied their movements through a stolen feed. His eyes were calm, steady. "Hello, Kate," he murmured to the empty room. He smiled faintly. "Time to see if you're still you, or if you're already me." The storm was coming. Hayes could feel it in her bones, in the way her heart refused to rest. She had resisted Spectre for so long, built a cage out of silence and self-control. But cages crack. And she wasn't sure if Reeves and his men understood that when it did, they might not be ready for who stepped out. Because sometimes, the ghost inside you wasn't the enemy. Sometimes, it was the only thing keeping you alive. Why did she let the shot hit her? The training round slammed into Hayes's chest, hard enough to bruise, but she hadn't moved. She had stood still, weapon half-raised, letting the role player walk past her and straight into Adams's fire team. Seconds later, her teammates were cut down in a perfect crossfire. Exercise over. Mission failed. When the lights came back on in the mock compound, Adams ripped off his helmet and rounded on her, fury boiling over. "You had one job, Hayes, one sector, and you froze again. In the real world, we'd all be dead because of you." Hayes stood at attention, her eyes fixed on a point far beyond him. Her voice was flat. "No excuse, sir." Her calm only enraged him further. "That's all you've got, no excuse." Wilson tried to intervene, but Adams shrugged him off. "She's a liability. You know it, I know it. She doesn't belong here." Hayes didn't flinch, didn't blink. But Reeves, watching from the doorway, saw it, the faint tremor in her hand. Not fear, not shame, something far more dangerous. Control slipping. The cage cracking. Hours later, Reeves summoned her to his office. She walked in, spine straight, face unreadable. "Sit," he said quietly. She obeyed. For a long moment, he studied her, the flicker of muscle in her jaw, the way her hands rested perfectly still on her knees. Finally, he asked, "Why did you let it happen?" Her eyes met his, calm, empty. "Because if I reacted the way I wanted to, they'd know." Reeves leaned forward, voice low. "Know what?" "That I'm not Hayes." The silence between them stretched, heavy. Finally, she said the words he hadn't wanted to hear. "I'm Spectre, and I can't let her out." That night, Hayes sat alone in her barracks, a small metal case open on her bunk. Inside lay a single photograph. 6 faces, younger than, hard, sharp eyes, Ghost Knife Team 7. 3 of them were already dead. Edward in Tokyo, Maria in James on American soil. And David Cooper, once their leader, now their executioner. Her own face stared back at her from the photo, harder, colder. Before Baghdad, before she'd chosen the mission over Cooper, before she'd learned what it meant to be both weapon and human and to fail at both. She closed the case with a snap. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. In the command center, Reeves stood with Harrison, Winters, and General Marshall. The air was heavy, thick with tension. On the screen, grainy surveillance footage played out, a CIA safe house in Kabul under siege. The attackers moved with precision. 4 men. 1 breach team, 1 overwatch, 1 security. Hayes's voice was steady as she watched. Ghost knife configuration. Marshall nodded grimly. Physical dimensions match Cooper's profile. Hayes studied the footage carefully, his stance, the way he favored his shoulder, the subtle rhythm of his steps. "It's him," she said softly. Reeves's jaw tightened. Why expose himself with a direct assault? "Because he knows we're coming," Hayes answered. "He's setting the stage, forcing our hand." Marshall's voice was flat. Which means you deploy tonight, wheels up in 90 minutes. The words hung heavy in the room. Back in the barracks, Adams muttered to Wilson and Miller, his voice low but sharp. She's different since that general showed up. Watch her eyes. Sometimes it's like someone else is looking out. Miller nodded. I've seen it too, the way she moves. It's not training, it's something else. Something the brass isn't telling us, Adams growled. Parker, still clinging to his quiet hope, said, maybe she's more than we think. Adams's reply was cold, or less. The briefing before deployment was short, clinical. Reeves outlined the mission parameters, but the men's eyes kept drifting to Hayes. Finally, Adams snapped. Sir, with respect, if she freezes out there, we all die. You know it, I know it. Why is she even here? Reeves's reply was firm. Because I said so, that's enough. But Hayes caught the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He wanted to believe her, needed to, but trust was a fragile thing and hers had already shattered. An hour later, in a darkened room, General Marshall made it official. You've been fighting it, Hayes, but we can't wait anymore. Not with Cooper moving like this. We need Spectre. She sat rigid in her chair, hands clasped, jaw clenched. No. Winters leaned forward. It's not a choice. Cooper won't stop, and if you don't face him at full capacity, you won't survive. Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned. Do you have any idea what it cost me to bury her, to fight her every day, every hour? Yes, Winters said softly, because I helped create her. Silence. Finally, Hayes whispered, if I let her out, what if she doesn't go back in? Marshall didn't hesitate. Then at least you'll still be alive, alive to make choices, alive to stop him. Winters's voice was flat, alive to kill him. The room fell quiet. Then 3 words cut through it all. Ghost knife, execute. The transformation was subtle, but undeniable. Her posture shifted, precise and economical. Her eyes sharpened, focus crystallized. The limp vanished. When she spoke, her voice was the same, yet not the same. Activation confirmed, Spectre operational. Reeves watched her step out of the room minutes later, her movements predatory, fluid, lethal. Gone was the hesitant comms specialist. In her place was someone else entirely. And as she passed him in the hallway, she paused just long enough to say, "Don't get in my way, Captain." The words weren't a threat. They were a warning. Outside, engines roared to life. The team loaded gear, weapons clattering in the dark. Hayes, no, Spectre, checked her rifle with practiced ease. Not the sloppy motions they'd seen before. Every movement was perfect. Adams stared openly. Who the hell are you? Spectre looked at him once, then turned back to her weapon. Someone who's not going to miss this time. No one laughed. Not this time. Reeves strapped in as the helicopter lifted, the rotors chopping through the Afghan night. He glanced across at her. Hayes sat still, eyes fixed forward, face unreadable, but she wasn't Hayes anymore. And Reeves realized the truth he had dreaded since Virginia. They hadn't just deployed with a comms specialist. They had unleashed a weapon. And weapons didn't care who they destroyed, as long as the mission was complete. Far below, in the mountains, David Cooper smiled as the chopper thundered overhead. He knew. He always knew. And this time, it was Hayes he was waiting for. It was Spectre. The night was cold, the mountains silent, but inside the helicopter, Reeves's mind churned. His men sat tense, each of them stealing glances at Hayes as if trying to decide if she was still one of them. He wasn't sure of the answer anymore. Maybe she wasn't sure either. Because sometimes, in war, the most dangerous enemy wasn't the one across the battlefield. It was the one inside you. And Reeves knew, with a sinking certainty, that the war inside Kate Hayes was only beginning. Why was Kabul so quiet? The helicopter set down on the outskirts of the city just after midnight. Dust swirled, rotors cutting the darkness into pieces. Reeves's team filed out in silence, weapons raised, eyes scanning the shadows. But the streets were still, too still. The city always had noise. Dogs barking, vendors calling, children running in alleys. But tonight, the silence was suffocating, the kind that pressed against your ribs and whispered of danger. Hayes stepped off last, rifle in hand. Her movements were fluid now, predatory. Not the stilted motions of the comms specialist they had once mocked. This was Spectre, activated, sharpened, unrestrained. Reeves felt it like a weight on his chest. She wasn't hiding anymore. The target was a CIA safe house on the east side. Intelligence said Cooper had hit it earlier, but the bodies had been cleared before they arrived. The only thing left behind was the smell of smoke and iron, and the faint echo of footsteps in the dust. Adams whispered, "He's not stupid enough to leave without planting something." Hayes crouched near the broken doorway, fingers brushing the ground. "Not something," she murmured, "someone." The shot came a second later, sniper fire from a rooftop 3 blocks away. Parker went down hard, a scream tearing from his throat as his leg burst with blood. "Contact," Reeves barked, dragging him back into cover. Adams and Wilson fired toward the rooftops, muzzle flashes slicing through the night. Mitchell worked frantically over Parker, hands slick with blood. But Hayes was already moving. She slipped from cover like smoke, sprinting low, rifle cradled. Every motion was pure economy. She knew exactly where the shot had come from, and she didn't hesitate. One rooftop, one shadow. She climbed with impossible speed, her boots silent on broken stone. The sniper never had a chance. One clean shot sent her mass. The body toppled from the rooftop, landing hard in the dust below. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Back inside the safe house, the team regrouped. Parker was pale but stable, Mitchell keeping pressure on the wound. Adams paced furiously. "That's it, I'm done. She doesn't freeze anymore, she doesn't miss. She doesn't even breathe like the rest of us. You saw her move out there, that's not human." Wilson frowned. "She saved Parker's life." "She's not Hayes," Adams snapped. "She's something else, and we're just collateral." Reeves cut him off. "Enough." But even as he said it, his eyes drifted toward her. Hayes sat in the corner, cleaning her rifle with mechanical precision. Her face was calm, unreadable, but her eyes were colder than he had ever seen. Was Adams wrong? Or was he the only one willing to say the truth aloud? Hours passed. The safe house remained quiet, but Reeves couldn't rest. He stepped outside into the narrow alley, the distant hum of the city seeping through the silence. Hayes followed. She didn't ask permission, didn't wait for an order. She simply appeared beside him, her presence sharp as the knife strapped to her thigh. "You're not sleeping either," she said softly. "Can't," Reeves admitted. "Too many questions." She tilted her head. "About me." He didn't answer. After a moment she whispered, "Spectre is who they made me. Hayes is who I fought to be. I don't know which one is left." Reeves turned to her, studying the rigid line of her shoulders, the tremor she tried to bury. "You saved us," he said quietly. Her eyes flickered, "for now." He almost asked the question burning on his tongue, "Will you save us tomorrow?" But he didn't. Because he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. At dawn, Harrison's voice came through the comms. "Spectre, Reeves. Intel confirms Cooper's trail north of your position. Abandoned compound in the plain. He left it for you." Reeves felt his stomach sink. "It's a trap," he muttered. "Of course it's a trap," Harrison replied. "The question is whether you can survive it." Spectre's voice was calm, steady. "We'll survive." Reeves stared at her. It wasn't confidence. It wasn't reassurance. It was a statement of fact. But whose survival was she guaranteeing? The team, or her own? They moved at first light. The plain stretched before them, dry earth cracking beneath their boots. The compound loomed in the distance, an old Soviet outpost, half-collapsed walls rising from the dust like broken teeth. Every step closer tightened Reeves's chest. Something about it felt wrong, too open, too quiet. Adams muttered, "He wants us to walk into it." Spectre adjusted her rifle, eyes locked forward. "Good, let him watch." Her voice sent a shiver through Reeves. The first explosion hit as they crossed the threshold. The ground erupted, dirt and shrapnel tearing into the air. Mitchell went down screaming, his arm shredded. "Ambush!" Reeves shouted, dragging him into cover. Gunfire erupted from the walls. Shadows moved in the windows. Cooper's men, trained, precise, relentless. The team returned fire, bullets sparking off crumbling stone. Adams cursed, firing until his rifle clicked empty. But Spectre didn't take cover. She stood in the open, calm, her rifle steady. One shot, a man fell. Another shot, another target gone. Her movements were inhuman, controlled, unflinching, surgical. And Reeves realized with horror that Adams had been right. This wasn't Hayes anymore. This was Spectre. In the chaos, a voice crackled over the comms, calm, familiar. "Hello, Kate." Her body froze for a fraction of a second. "Cooper." "You left me once," his voice drawled. "Baghdad, remember, you chose the mission over me." Her hands tightened on the rifle. "You completed the mission, Hayes, but you failed me, and now I'm going to return the favor." Gunfire raged. Reeves shouted orders. Adams dragged Mitchell deeper into cover. Parker tried to steady his aim despite his leg wound. But Hayes barely heard them. Cooper's voice filled her head. "You think you're fighting me, but you're fighting yourself. Spectre versus Hayes, which one wins?" She whispered to herself, almost too softly to hear. "Not you, not ever you." Then she stepped back into the firestorm, rifle rising. The battle raged for minutes that felt like hours. Dust filled the air. The compound shook with each blast. And through it all, Spectre moved like death itself. Reeves watched her, torn between awe and dread. She was saving them. She was terrifying them. And he couldn't decide which truth mattered more. At last, silence fell. The last of Cooper's men lay broken in the dust. The team was battered, bloodied, alive, but barely. And Cooper was gone. Hayes stood in the center of the compound, rifle smoking, chest heaving. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Adams said it, voice low but sharp. "She's not Hayes anymore." Reeves didn't answer. Because deep down, he feared Adams was right. That night, as they regrouped in the hollow shell of the compound, Reeves caught Hayes staring at her hands. She flexed her fingers slowly, as if testing whether they still belonged to her. Finally, she whispered, "If Spectre stays out, what's left of me?" Reeves had no answer. Because sometimes, in war, victory wasn't about who you defeated. It was about who you lost along the way. And Reeves feared the woman they had once called Hayes was already gone. Why was Cooper sparing them? The compound still reeked of gunpowder and blood. Bodies lay where they had fallen, dust already beginning to settle over them like a burial shroud. Reeves's team was battered, Mitchell's arm shredded, Parker's leg torn, Adams nursing burns on his shoulder. But none of them were dead. Not because of luck. Because Cooper had chosen not to finish them. And Reeves knew it wasn't mercy. It was something worse. It was personal. Hours later, as the team regrouped in the shadows of the broken walls, the radio crackled. A voice slid through the static like a knife. "Still alive, Kate. Good, I need you alive." Every head snapped toward Hayes. She didn't answer, didn't even move, but her jaw tightened, her breath slowing. "See, the others don't matter, not really. They're just noise, but you You're the melody. You and me, we were the program. The rest were filler. Adams swore under his breath. What the hell is this? Cooper's laugh carried across the line, low and steady. They don't know, do they, that you're not their quiet little comms girl, that you're mine, always were. Reeves ripped the radio from its mount, slamming it off. The silence that followed was worse than the voice. Hayes finally spoke, barely above a whisper. He's not wrong. The words hung heavy in the air. Wilson finally asked the question no one else wanted to. What does he mean, Hayes? She didn't look at him, didn't look at any of them. Her eyes stayed locked on the broken doorway, as if expecting Cooper to walk through it. He means Baghdad, she said softly. He means I left him, and he means he'll never forgive me. Adams barked a laugh, sharp and bitter. So we're bleeding out in the desert because of your unfinished business. Reeves cut him off sharply. Enough. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt grew deeper. That night Reeves found Hayes outside, sitting alone on the rubble. The moonlight cut her face in half, one side shadow, one side light. You're not sleeping, he said quietly. I don't sleep, she replied. He stood beside her, silent for a long time. Finally he asked, what happened in Baghdad? Her breath hitched, the smallest crack in her armor. I obeyed orders, she whispered. I left him and I lived. She turned her head, finally meeting his eyes. Tell me, Captain, which one of those do you think he hates me for more? 2 days later they moved north. The mission had shifted. Officially they were still pursuing Cooper's network. Unofficially everyone knew the truth. This wasn't about objectives anymore. It was about a reckoning between two ghosts, Spectre and Cooper. And Reeves's men were caught in the middle. The village came into view just before dawn. Mud brick houses clustered around a single dusty road, children scattering as the convoy rolled in. But the villagers didn't look afraid. They looked expectant. That was the first sign. The second was the silence, too quiet. Reeves barely had time to order a perimeter before the first explosion tore through the street. An IED buried under loose stone. The blast flipped their lead vehicle, flames licking at the sky. Wilson went down hard, shrapnel tearing through his vest. Gunfire erupted from rooftops, figures in loose robes, weapons braced. Another ambush. But this one was different. Because every shot, every angle, every trap, it wasn't aimed to kill. It was aimed to corner. To funnel them. To push them exactly where Cooper wanted. Spectre moved like she had been waiting for this. She shoved Reeves down behind a wall just as a burst of gunfire stitched the air where he had been standing. Move east, she snapped. Her voice was sharp, commanding, not Hayes's voice at all. They followed, not because they trusted her, but because instinct told them not to hesitate. Through alleys, across rooftops, down broken stairways, they fought their way east. Every step Spectre was ahead, pulling them through the trap with precision that was frightening. Finally, they burst into the shell of an abandoned school. The walls were pockmarked with bullets. The air smelled of chalk and smoke. And there, standing in the open, was Cooper. He looked older, leaner. His hair streaked with gray, his eyes colder than Hayes remembered. But his smile hadn't changed. Kate, he drawled, lowering his weapon, you came. Spectre's rifle was already raised, steady on his chest, but her finger didn't squeeze the trigger. Why, she asked. He tilted his head. Why what? Why didn't you kill them? Cooper's smile widened. Because I wanted witnesses. He spread his arms as if offering himself. Go ahead, show them what you really are. Her breath hitched just once. Behind her, Adams whispered, what the hell is happening right now? But Reeves said nothing. His eyes stayed locked on her, on the tremor in her hands, on the battle raging inside her. Cooper stepped closer. You left me in Baghdad. You buried Spectre because you were afraid of her, But you can't hide forever, not from me, not from yourself. His voice dropped, sharp as glass. You're not Hayes, you're mine. The words cut deeper than any blade. Her rifle shook. For a moment, Reeves thought she was going to fire. Then she lowered it. I'm not yours, she whispered, not anymore. Cooper's smile faded. The gunfire outside resumed, his men closing in, the trap snapping shut. And Reeves realized the truth. This wasn't just about killing them. This was about breaking her. The fight that followed was chaos. Bullets tore through plaster. Dust choked the air. Reeves's men scrambled for cover, dragging the wounded with them. But in the center of it all, Hayes and Cooper moved like two sides of the same coin. Every shot, every step, every glance, it was like watching mirrors collide. And Reeves knew, with bone-deep certainty, that this wasn't about who survived the firefight. It was about which ghost would walk away whole. When the last shot echoed away, silence fell heavy. Cooper was gone, vanished into the dust. The team was alive barely. Wilson's wound was bad, Adams was limping, Mitchell's arm was useless. And Hayes' specter stood in the doorway, her rifle slack at her side, her chest heaving. Reeves approached slowly. You had him, he said quietly. Why didn't you take the shot? Her eyes met his, haunted. Because if I did, she would never come back. For the first time, Reeves understood. It wasn't just Cooper she was fighting. It was herself. And he had no idea which one of them was winning. That night under a fractured sky, Reeves sat with the weight of it all pressing on him. His men were breaking. His mission was shattered. And the woman at the center of it, their salvation, their danger, was unraveling before his eyes. He lit a cigarette, staring at the embers. Sometimes war wasn't about strategy. Sometimes it was about who you became when the choices you made wouldn't let you sleep. And Reeves feared Hayes was becoming someone none of them would recognize when this was over. Why did Reeves hesitate before giving the order? The team crouched in the ruins of an old watchtower, their wounds patched with makeshift bandages, their morale hanging by a thread. They had been running nonstop for days, chased not by an army but by one man's shadow. David Cooper. Every move they made, he anticipated. Every safe house they reached, he had already gutted. Every route out, he had mined with traps. Reeves had always believed war was chaos, unpredictable, but this wasn't chaos, this was control. And Cooper was playing them like pieces on a board. The team was splintering. Adams was packing, muttering under his breath. Wilson, pale from blood loss, could barely stay awake. Parker clutched his rifle too tightly, his young face hardening in ways Reeves hated to see. Mitchell worked on his shredded arm, jaw clenched against the pain. And Hayes' specter sat in the corner silent, watching. Not just them, herself. Because she could feel it, the lines between Kate and Spectre blurring. Every day, every fight, the cage weakened, and she wasn't sure there was anything left to hold it together. Adam snapped first. This is insane. We're bleeding out, chasing a ghost who knows every step before we take it. And why? Because she jabbed a finger at Hayes can't finish what she started in Baghdad. Wilson stirred weakly. Shut up, Adams. No, Adams barked. You've all seen it, she's not one of us. She's one of them, ghost knife. A lab rat in a human body, and now Cooper's playing us because of her. Reeves rose slowly. Stand down. But Adams pressed on, his voice breaking with anger. How many more of us have to get torn apart before you admit it? She's the reason we're out here. She's the reason we're dying piece by piece. Everyone's eyes turned to Hayes. She didn't move, didn't defend herself. Finally, she said softly, he's not wrong. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Reeves pulled her outside before the team fractured completely. The desert night stretched endless around them, stars sharp against the black. "You can't give them that," he said. "Give them what?" she asked quietly. "Your silence." Her eyes flickered, haunted. "What do you want me to say, Captain? That I'm not Spectre, that I'm not the reason Cooper is doing this, that every bullet in this desert isn't aimed at me?" Her voice cracked. "I can't give you lies anymore." Reeves swallowed hard. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that they needed her, that she was more than what they had made her. But the truth stuck in his throat, because a part of him feared Adams was right. At dawn, they moved again. Cooper didn't strike immediately. He let them sweat, let exhaustion eat at their bones, let paranoia turn every shadow into a threat. By midday, Parker finally spoke. "Why is he letting us live?" No one answered, but they all thought the same thing. Because he wasn't done with Hayes. That night the radio came alive again. Cooper's voice slithered through the static, calm and intimate, like he was whispering into Hayes's ear. "Do you remember, Kate, Baghdad, the heat, the dust, the way you looked at me when I told you not to leave?" Her hands clenched around the radio. "You said nothing," he continued. "That's what broke me, not that you left, that you couldn't even say goodbye." The team sat in silence, every word like a knife twisting between them. Cooper's voice hardened. "You chose orders over me, and now you'll choose again, them or me, Hayes or Spectre, one lives, one dies." The radio clicked dead. Hayes sat frozen, her face pale. And Reeves realized with a chill that Cooper wasn't just trying to kill them. He was trying to force her to kill herself. Later, Reeves found her alone again, staring at her rifle like it was a mirror. "Don't listen to him," Reeves said softly. Her eyes lifted, wet with something she never let the others see. "He's right," she whispered. "I left him, and I've been leaving myself ever since." Reeves knelt beside her. "You made a choice, a soldier's choice." Her voice trembled. "And what if I was never supposed to be a soldier?" The question cut him deeper than any bullet. 2 days later, the breaking point came. They reached another safe house, empty, abandoned. But inside, waiting on the table, was a single item. A photograph. The Ghost Knife team. All of them alive, smiling. And across the photo, in neat, deliberate handwriting, "The last ghost belongs to me." Hayes's breath caught. She touched the photo with trembling fingers. Adam swore. "He's inside our heads now. He's playing us like a damn game." Reeves stared at the words, his chest tight. No, not a game. A message. This wasn't about the mission anymore. It was about ownership. That night, Reeves couldn't shake the sound of her voice, fragile, trembling. What if I was never supposed to be a soldier? And he wondered, for the first time, if the fight wasn't against Cooper at all. If it was against a system that had turned people like Hayes into weapons, and then abandoned them when the cost became too high. He looked at her across the room, her face pale in the dim light, and felt a weight settle in his chest. Maybe saving her wasn't about stopping Cooper. Maybe it was about reminding her she was human at all. But Cooper wasn't finished. At dawn, as the team prepared to move, the radio crackled again. This time, it wasn't his voice. It was a child crying. Then a woman pleading in Dari. Then silence. And finally, Cooper's voice. "You can't save them all, Kate, but you can save one. Choose wisely." The transmission ended. Hayes's hand shook. Reeves grabbed her arm. "It's a trap." Her eyes lifted hard now, Spectre's eyes. "Then I'll walk into it." Reeves felt the chill sink into his bones. Because he knew she meant it. And because sometimes, the deadliest trap wasn't the one set in the dirt. It was the one set in your heart. Why did the air feel heavier as they entered the valley? Reeves scanned every instinct screaming. The sun was sinking, shadows stretching long across the ground. The village Cooper had drawn them to lay below, silent, abandoned as if time itself had walked away. Hayes walked ahead of the team, her steps steady, her rifle loose in her grip. She didn't speak. She hadn't spoken since the last transmission. Reeves wanted to call her back, to remind her she wasn't walking alone. But deep down, he knew she was. Because this wasn't their war anymore. It was hers. The first body was waiting at the well. A man local, throat cut clean. His eyes stared upward as if accusing the sky. A message. The second body hung from the doorway of a clay house. One of theirs. CIA liaison, stripped of gear, mouth bound with cloth. His chest bore a single word carved deep. Spectre. The team moved in tight, weapons raised. Every corner, every rooftop could have been Cooper. But Hayes didn't flinch. She walked past the bodies without a glance. Her face was carved from stone. Reeves watched her and realized something terrifying. Spectre wasn't fighting for control anymore. She was in control. They reached the center of the village, just as the sun dipped below the horizon. And there he was. David Cooper. Standing in the open, rifle slung, hands empty, calm, waiting. "Hello, Kate," he said softly. The world seemed to narrow around her. She raised her rifle, but he only smiled. "You won't shoot me." Her finger hovered on the trigger. "Why not?" she asked. "Because if you do," Cooper murmured, "Spectre wins and Hayes dies." The team spread out, circling, weapons trained. Reeves's voice cut through the silence. "This ends now, Cooper. Hands where I can see them." But Cooper's eyes never left Hayes. "You see, Captain, you don't understand. She's not your soldier, she's mine. She was made for this. Made for me, the rest of you, extras, disposable." Adams growled, finger tight on his trigger. "I've had enough of this psycho." "Don't," Hayes said sharply. Her voice cracked like a whip. And for the first time, Reeves realized she wasn't protecting Cooper. She was protecting them. Cooper stepped closer, hands still raised. His voice dropped to a low, intimate murmur. "Do you remember Baghdad, Kate? You remember the fire, the blood, the silence after you left me? You thought you were saving the mission, but you were just killing yourself." Her chest heaved, the rifle trembled. "I survived," she whispered. "No," he said. "Spectre survived. Hayes died in that alley. You've just been pretending ever since." The words cut through her like shrapnel. Behind her, Reeves took a step forward. "Hayes." "Stay back," she hissed, eyes locked on Cooper. Gunfire erupted without warning. Not from Cooper, from the rooftops. Shadows moved, his men hidden until now. Bullets tore through the air, dust exploding around them. The team dove for cover, shouting, firing back. Mitchell dragged Wilson into a doorway. Adams cursed as his rifle jammed. Reeves fired blindly, yelling, "Hayes, move." But she didn't. She stood in the open, rifle steady, eyes burning. Every shot she fired dropped an enemy, precise, unflinching. Spectre in full. Reeves felt his stomach twist. She wasn't fighting it anymore. She was embracing it. Minutes stretched like hours, bodies fell, smoke choked the air. And then silence. Again, only Cooper remained. He hadn't moved. His smile was calm, almost sad. "Well done," he said softly. "I knew you still had it." Hayes's chest heaved. Sweat ran down her face. Her hands shook around the rifle. "You want me to kill you," she whispered. "I want you to accept what you are," Cooper replied. Her finger tightened on the trigger. But then she lowered the weapon. "No," she said. Her voice was Hayes's voice, trembling, human. "I'm not your weapon. I'm not theirs. I'm me." For the first time, Cooper's smile faltered. And in that heartbeat, Reeves stepped forward, weapon raised. The shot cracked loud in the night. Cooper collapsed. Not by Hayes's hand. By Reeves's. The silence after was unbearable. Hayes stood frozen, staring at Cooper's body. 100 memories flooded her eyes. Baghdad, ghost knife, the orders, the silence. Finally she whispered, "It should have been me." Reeves lowered his rifle slowly. "No, it should never have been you." They buried Cooper outside the village, the desert wind scattering dust over his grave. No prayers, no words, just silence. Hayes stood apart, her eyes distant. Reeves watched her, knowing the war inside her wasn't over. It might never be. But something had shifted. She had chosen not to pull the trigger. And maybe, in some quiet way, that meant Hayes had survived after all. The team limped back toward extraction. Adams still glared, distrust heavy in his eyes. Wilson was half carried by Mitchell. Parker stumbled but refused to quit. And Hayes walked among them, rifle slung, silent. She was still Spectre. She would always be Spectre. But she was also Hayes. And for the first time, Reeves believed those two truths could exist together. At base, Harrison and Winters were waiting. They wanted debriefs, reports, files. They wanted to dissect her like the weapon they had made. But Hayes said nothing. She walked past them, past the colonel, past the spook, and into the night air. Reeves followed, stopping a few feet away. "You don't owe them anything," he said. She turned, her eyes tired but steady. "I don't owe anyone anymore." For a moment neither spoke. The desert wind whispered around them. Then she said softly, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." And she walked away, into the darkness. Not as Spectre. Not as a weapon. As Hayes. Reeves stood watching until she disappeared from sight. And he realized something he hadn't allowed himself to believe since this began. Maybe the war hadn't broken her. Maybe it had saved her. Not by erasing Spectre, but by reminding Hayes that even ghosts can choose who they are.